But if we just take a look at this first one, and I've tried to categorize these as meaningfully as possible. The first possibility, obviously, if Jesus did resurrect, but this would be the first alternative, that Jesus never existed. Now, this is not very likely at all. We've talked about this before on other videos, but this quote comes from Wikipedia, actually. And I don't usually use Wikipedia, my standard for scholarship, I can assure you. But I look at this as a very telling admission on the behalf of public sources, right? The non-historicity of Jesus has never garnered significant support among scholars. Mythicism is rejected by virtually all mainstream scholars of antiquity and have been considered a fringe theory for more than 2 centuries. The idea that Jesus didn't exist, that there was no such person as Jesus of Nazareth. Most people, I've said this before in videos, most people will universally acknowledge that Jesus existed. They'll just try to make sense of what that means, what he did, what kind of person he was, who he was. Was he who he said he was? Can we really get the real historical Jesus? Do we get that in the Gospels, or do we need, independent sources? That would be the question. It's not a matter of whether this guy named Jesus existed. Certainly a person named Jesus existed. So that is the first one. And I'm kind of putting these in order of sort of least problematic to more problematic, or easiest objections to the most difficult and complex objections. So let's look at the second one then. Oh, I like that. I like what Victoria here says. I'll stop sharing for a sec. There's also Jesus over-existed. These stories were based on several people. That's a good point too, that you have this sort of conglomeration of different stories that were weaved together, that were grafted together, and somehow that. So this came. There was a, I think it was called the Jesus Seminar, came out in the 60s and 70s, that aimed to identify the real, what they called historical Jesus. And to Christians, that's like, yeah, that sounds great. I want to find the historical Jesus. I want to see what this Jesus really was like. But they weren't doing it in that spirit. They were doing it in the spirit of, let's forget about all these mythical elements that we assume are embellishments, and let's look at, like, to find the real person, like the human person, the one who never claimed to be God. Of course, as Christians, we understand that you can't do that. This person that they are looking for doesn't exist, because Jesus did claim to be God. He was divine and human. And so if they're looking for such a person, well, they're not going to find that person. And you notice there in that approach, they already have these really dangerous presuppositions, namely that, well, a human can't be of a divine nature, and a God can't be incarnate. Also, presumably miracles can't happen, that sort of thing. If you start with those presuppositions, you're obviously going to end up in a certain place, like they do. And that is actually what we see with a lot of these theories. So let's see, and you'll find that over-existed part. I like the way that's phrased, over-existed. Not that you can exist too much, but you get the idea.